Hello, everybody. Chris Fluke here. Chris Fluke Podcast, episode number 100. We hit the triple digits, guys and girls. Man, that's a pretty big milestone, and I'm happy to reach it. But I have a topic of discussion today. It's going to be a tough one. Now, this morning I dropped my daughter off at school. So it's April 28th, 2022. So I dropped my daughter off at school. And I go to this coffee shop down the road. I put in about 90 minutes of work, take a 50-minute walk. Then I'm like, as I'm walking, I'm thinking about things. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go get some breakfast now. And then I'm going to go and I'll do another 90 minutes of work before I have to pick her up. So I got some breakfast. And as I walked out of that breakfast shop here, I still didn't know how I was going to handle this situation. But I saw one of the businesses right next door had this, they had a sandwich board up outside their shop. And it said this: "You still haven't met all the people who are going to love you." And so I thought that would be that was kind of a perfect thing for the day, because let me just say one more thing before I get into this, just to give myself a chance here to recover. Carl Jung, the psychologist, said that we all personal problems are good for society, and sharing ours, we hope that we could help yours. So 9 years ago, I got a phone call. I was at a gym where I was working. I had some appointments on a Sunday morning. Phone calls from my mom, and she left a voicemail. I didn't call her back right away. I listened to the voicemail, and I knew something was wrong. And I said, I was like, probably just said crap over and over again, or maybe an F word, or maybe another curse word. I don't even know. Then I took a breath, and I went out and I trained somebody, and I remember who it was. Her name was Sarah. So I trained her, but the whole time I'm kind of thinking about this phone call, and then I called my mom back as I was in between appointments, and my last appointment was a childhood friend, and basically my mom just said, "He's gone, Chris, Ryan's gone." And my brother, so it was 9 years ago. I mean, he was 29 years old. He died of a drug overdose, and my mom didn't have to say anything more than that, and I kind of knew what was going on, knew the cause. She's been struggling for things like this for a while, for a lot of years prior, and you don't know how you're going to prepare for the loss of somebody really close to you. You could be like, it's going to kill you one day, but that does really absolutely nothing to prepare you for that phone call, and it kind of just takes the life out of you. And then my friend came in who was also really looked up to my brother, and I told him what happened. He was my next appointment. He cried, I cried. I went to my parents' house, and then you're just kind of there with my parents and don't know what to do. And eventually you let some people know that are close to you. I even think back now, and I'm like, I went out and I met up with friends, and we all got together at like a restaurant or bar in Hellertown, and we just kind of hung out, and we're just kind of there for each other, and didn't really talk too much about things, but just spend some time together. And I'm like, I can't believe the day that I found out that my brother died. I went and hung out with friends at a restaurant. But anyway, that's just what we did that day. And so just to backtrack on this thing a little bit now, he just over the years, he just struggled with stuff, and I don't know why. He always had this volatile personality, but he had like a big heart. So the people that he was around, and the people knew that he cared about them. He coached wrestling, and he was a good coach. A lot of the kids that he did coach stayed in touch with him over the years. We had some success. He ended up getting me coaching wrestling at the time, which eventually got me to coaching football, which is something, between the two sports I did for like 12 years of my life, right? A little bit, right around a third of my life I spent coaching, and I think he had a big part of it. He had a big part of that. But during this whole process now, when he was coaching, he just started hitting this downward spiral, and don't even know what brought it on. Like I was saying, his whole life he always had this fiery temper. He'd always get in trouble. Like I never really understood his demeanor and his mentality towards things, and we're pretty much polar opposites. And then we had our moments of just absolutely despising each other, and then we had these moments where we were pretty close. And I think as we got older, we grew a little closer. We kind of understood each other a little bit better. We'll push each other's buttons, and how we could, we both wanted to be able to spend time with each other. So we just kind of made sure, I guess, we didn't do things that annoyed the hell out of the other person. But So we start struggling with some stuff, and it's like, what leads somebody to, like, this is all speculation, right? Because I don't know too much about what led my brother down this path. Everything that happens in our lives kind of plants a seed for, like, our behavior. So I don't know if something happened to him growing up. I don't know what led him down this path. I don't have a clue, right? I don't know why, somebody chooses to do things. We grew up at a time where drugs were always kind of around, but we kind of grew up in this middle of this era where, they call it like the opioid epidemic, the overdose era, like from the year 2000. So pretty much in our prime exploring years, we'll say. We're both born in the 80s. Where kids experiment with things, right? That's when this boom was in overdose deaths. From the year 2000 to 2014, there was a 2,000% increase in deaths. A small downshift in 2018, but then COVID-19 led to another huge increase in overdose deaths. 2020 to 2021, there was 100,000 deaths, which was a record. That went up 28% from the 28.5% from the previous year. So we were born at a time in our lives where, as we hit those experimental years, a lot of these drugs, these crazy drugs, were starting to get introduced. And fortunately, I don't know what drives somebody to do something, but I was in a friend group that people drank, people might have smoked weed, but like nobody really advanced beyond that. But I knew a lot of people, kind of some older people, that did advance beyond that, and there's a decent chunk of people that I grew up with that are dead. You think back, you tell a high school kid now, like 5 people you're in class with or something, or 5 people that are in your grade are going to die of an overdose, and they're like, no way. But that's kind of like how it goes, right? Like that's kind of what our reality was, based off of when we were born. So like I'm saying, right, I could only speculate to the why, but as you do things, as you do something like that you can't be proud of yourself if you choose to do a drug, like a street drug, like let's just say if you're depressed to begin with and you tried to overcome that depression with something, eventually that something's not going to be enough and you might move on to something else. I think with my brother, it started out with some prescription stuff and eventually led to the use of heroin. I also think that there was something going on too where he was being prescribed things that he was basically lying in order to get a prescription. Addicts lie. They say they might want treatment, and then you go and you help them, then they check themselves out in a few days. Stuff like that happens, right? You can't use those lies against them. You just got to kind of be there, I think, to support them. But let me get back to what my train of thought was here. So there's always this personal responsibility, and I think, in Ryan's case, he got prescribed some things, so he always had this thing that he could kind of blame, which leads to the denial of some sort of individual responsibility for himself. He thought that this, whatever it was, say, this anxiety, this stress, this whatever, he wasn't going to be able to handle day-to-day activities if he didn't have this prescription, right? So he always kind of gave himself an out. And what that lie does, with that lie that, you deny yourself this personal responsibility for what's going on, and you blame some sort of outside source or some outside pressure or some outside individual, that lie eventually, the longer you keep telling yourself that, it's going to keep weakening you as an individual. And then the weaker you become, the more harmful you're going to become to yourself or to others. It's the weak individual that does these things. Not weak, like, it's not, I don't want to say this, it sounds so bad, but it's when we are in these weakened states that we might do something harmful to ourselves, to those that we love, or, just to anybody around us, right? It's usually not those people that are, it's like whenever we're feeling the best about ourselves, we're not going to go into total destruction mode. And I think hopefully all of that kind of makes sense there as I try to, I have these thoughts in my mind about how this like cycle goes where, you're feeling a little bit down to begin with, so you might do something else, and you might do this, and then you might do that, and then the next thing you know, the cycle starts over and you're at a little bit more of a weakened state, and that cycle is just going to keep continuing, and with each revolution on that path, you start at a weaker spot, and then next thing you know, you're on this terrible downward spiral and you don't know how to get yourself out. And in my brother's case, it was sad. It's sad for anybody, right? Because it's like, why does somebody do something like that? We don't always know. Why do people do harmful things to each other, themselves? We don't know. My brother had a meaningful life. He coached, like I said. He was getting involved as a teacher, and he kind of just threw it all away with some of these these poor decisions that he had. But those poor decisions were not like cognitively thought of. Something was going on in there that led him down that path. So be it, right? I don't know why things got the way that they got. But if you would have been at his viewing, if you would have been at his funeral, he would have saw the impact that he had, right? But you can't do that. You can't go back in time and see how many lives that you've touched. He led a meaningful life. He touched a lot of people. A lot of people love him and a lot of people miss him, but yet he didn't feel that himself. And that's sad. And you know, you think back and you wonder, like, is there anything that somebody could have done along the way? Friends talked about doing things like, oh, you gotta, you know, whoop his ass when he says this or that. And I'm just like, that's honestly what you think is what's gonna help him. But there's no real great solution out there that people could go to right away. So you can't just smack somebody out of this funk that they're in. Maybe 1 out of 10 people that works, but it doesn't work for everybody. And I think the one thing that you have to do is, if there is somebody that is struggling, you obviously don't want to enable. But if they're your family, man, if you're not there for them, what do you think that's going to do for their psyche overall? You know, it's like you burn so many bridges as like a drug addict that even your own family's going to throw you out. Then what do you really have? I think that puts you in a bigger funk. It could hit you in that rock bottom situation where some people could snap out of it, or it could just continue to put you in that downward spiral. Now we talked about the overdose deaths, right? And now we got this period of time where people were locked up, right, from 2020 to 2021 with COVID-19. And, you know, we have a 28.5% jump, and this stuff is still going on. I mean, from 2000 to today, you know, when everybody knows what's going on, the numbers are still rising, numbers are still spiking. And I think it's because there's no, people are lacking meaning. People are lacking, like they have a purpose. And because of that, they're making these poor decisions. And I always think back to this study I heard about that they did with rats in a lab, where they basically had cocaine in water, and when it was just that in there, the rats just continually went to that water, and they just kept going and going and going. But with the same water in the same cage, but with like a playground for the rats, like a wheel and all this other stuff to do, the rats didn't always choose the cocaine infused water, I guess is what it was. So when they had an option to choose, they chose what they felt in that moment. And a lot of times addicts don't feel like they have a choice. You know, they feel like they don't have another option. Going off of that too, we have, you know, they did some studies in New York, Harlem, I don't remember where it was. This guy Carl Hart did it, where they were either going to give addicts, I don't even know how the study was real. I think it was crack or money. And if the money was enough, the people took the money. They didn't always go to the crack. So to think that this drug could have such a grip on you that you're always going to choose it is not always valid. It's just like I said previously, like people need to feel like they have an option. If they don't feel like they have options, then they don't have a choice. And if they don't have a choice, they're probably going to use. You have that use versus choose option, right? And eventually, you know, people get into a funk. And I was looking up some different quotes on things. You know, one of these great thinkers of all time, Socrates, you know, he said, "It is only in death that we are truly cured of the sickness of life." And I think a lot of people that do find themselves in a funk think that life is sick and life is cruel and life is harsh, and the only way out of that is death. And I don't think that is true. And as my brother ended up passing, you know, we talked about all of these people. Like, you still haven't met all the people who are going to love you. You know, I think about this. I mean, we named our daughter, her middle name is Ryan, after him, so it's Amelia Ryan. And, you know, I tell her stories about her Uncle Ryan, and she knows. She sees pictures at my parents' house of him. But she's at an age of 4 now, where I'm just like, you know, the question is coming soon about death. She's already asked stuff, and you know, I don't want to say we skirted it, but we just answered in a way that not 100% honest, but not lying either. And I know that time's coming, and I know that, you know, when you go back to that quote, you still haven't met all the people who are going to love you. I know that my daughter would have loved him, and I know that he would have loved her. And it's, you know, just one less it's one less person that I guess loves you right at the end of the day. So, you just think, man, you just hope that with all these trials and tribulations that somebody could get another opportunity, to live and kind of be a part of everybody's lives and still continue to be a role in the lives that they've touched and the lives that they've cared about. But they're not physically able to do it. And going back to the guy Socrates again, he said, when death comes to a man, the mortal part of him dies, but the immortal part retires at the approach of death and escapes unharmed and indestructible. So the mortal part of you dies, but the immortal part doesn't. The immortal part lives on in us, and that's why we have our stories. We'll continue to share things in his honor and his name or whatever it may be, right? Those are the immortal things that are going to survive. And we need to keep, like Carl Jung said too, it's like our stories help other people, and there's going to be other people that are going through this, and the best way to do it is to let them know that there might be a community out there might be other people. Like I said, 100,000 people just died from 2020 to 2021. There's a lot of people, a lot of families out there that lost loved ones, and they don't know what to do about it right now. And I would just say that, it's already been 9 years, and I was in this coffee shop preparing for this, and I found myself almost getting choked up. So I'm not saying this in a way that says that I'm like totally over this. I'm totally recovered. I don't have these moments of sadness because I still have these awful thoughts, man, when, his body's in a funeral home, and I kissed his forehead, right? And he's ice cold, man. So you have these thoughts that still go on about somebody, you kissed a body that no longer has life in it, and it's freezing cold. And I also think sometimes, and I don't know why I think about this, even living on the farm, we have so many animals, like, there's just so much wildlife out there, and you see, like, just like that, like I talked about before, a hawk snatching up a bird, right? And I think about those final moments for that animal, for that bird. And I think about the final moments that my brother had on the bathroom floor. And with the death, was it something that he knew was coming and there was nothing he could do about it? Was it a totally hopeless feeling? Or was it just a gradual release into the wherever somebody goes? And I had a hard time with that close to, right on the days surrounding his death because of that. Like, was he there, like, calling, or like searching for help and being so hopeless and vulnerable, and nobody was able to be there to help and to answer his calls. So that's kind of the lingering effects I have from that. So I don't want to sound like I'm somebody that's past his death, but I think at some point we have to start living, and we can't let the death of somebody close to us like kill your soul too, like destroy you as an individual, where you don't think life has meaning. They took your brother, they took your child, they took your cousin. Death could take anybody close to us, but don't let death take you. Your life means something. Your life has purpose, and we need to live accordingly. You might be thinking, why do these cruel things and these awful things happen? And then maybe it's like the compromise that occurred, for us humans to be who we are and to adapt, to live the way that we live. Maybe that needs to be like, the caveat. It's like, if you want to live life like this, you have to know that these unexpected things might happen. If that's a compromise that you're willing to take, and if that's a task that you're willing to go ahead with, then you need to continue living and continue doing your thing. I thought about that a lot when we're about to have a child, and I'm thinking to myself, do you really want to bring a kid into this world? And then eventually I just snapped myself out of it and said, yeah, absolutely. I mean, all this cruelty and all this evil and all these awful things that can happen, those moments that I have with her, she's 4 years old, the moments that you have with her can never be replaced or taken. So you don't want the death, the drug use death, say, of my brother, right? I don't want I have 28, 29 years of memories with him, right? So you don't let that last act define who he was as a man. Just like you don't define, if you like 99% of a movie except how it ends, right? So many people will be critical of that. Let's not be that person, Let's remember the good times that you had with somebody you love. Let's keep living our lives in a purposeful and meaningful way. And don't let the loss of a loved one take you too. We have to be strong for those around us. And we got to keep on living, man. Hope you guys liked this episode. YouTube, Google, Stitcher, Spotify, Apple. If I didn't say that, the podcast is out. Like it, support this, share it. I have, all this stuff takes time, right? And eventually, we keep pumping these podcasts out. It's going to support these youth programs that we run after school, where we introduce physical fitness. We introduce challenges. We introduce, trying to get people to feel better about themselves so that they can live their life in a way that has a purpose and has meaning. And I'm hoping that's the one thing that kind of gets me going in the afternoons, is to give these kids an opportunity to do something good and to feel good about themselves. And then you just keep building off that, and then hopefully that snowballs out into all other areas of life, and that we could kind of reverse this awful curse going on in the world where people are feeling down in the dumps, right? And we can do it by just taking care of one kid at a time. You start with yourself, and then you start helping others. I hope you guys like this one. Peace, everybody.